back. Listen, I'm glad you're laughing because we are live and it's perfectly fine to laugh. Listen, welcome to Sláinte series. This is episode 5. With me, I have the most wonderful man in whiskey at the moment. Well, an Irish whiskey at least, because people are like a tad boring here in Ireland when it comes to whiskey. Fionnán O'Connor. And listen, Fionnán, we're just going to chat tonight. We don't care if people come on. We don't care if people watch us. We're not really fussed about that. But I just want to chat to you about the vintage casks, about old whiskey. I want to talk about what we did last summer. You know what I mean? And maybe what we're going to do this summer. So, yeah. Welcome, Fionnán.
That was a really creepy way of phrasing that. What exactly do you have planned for this summer? Because I'd like to know on camera, if we're live in this public audience, I think best to have these things out in the open.
I've got plenty planned for you, Fionnán. Listen, maybe at least 2 tastings with you. No, I mean, that's what we're going to be looking at 2, maybe 3 tastings, but definitely 2 tastings. In fact, I've got a couple of bottles here I was having a wee look at, maybe potentially using. So we'll maybe talk about them in a second. But listen, I'm going to have a wee dram tonight to start with. I'm going to go for this. Look at this bottle. This is cool, eh? This is a 10-year-old Macmara. So Swedish malt, 10 years old. First time I ever saw an age statement on the Macmara. Usually they have these funky names, but they've gone with an age statement. So I'm just gonna pour some in my glass. Have a bit of whiskey while we chat. You know, lovely to see some people. So yes, Connor, good to see you. Garth, you're shouting out Fionnán already. Woohoo! Go on, Fionnán. He must be a lover. David, nice to see you. Jenny, good. Hiya, Jenny. How are we? Kevin, excellent. Listen, so Fionnán, what's in your glass?
Redbreast 21, which I had totally forgotten was still in the house, and then I found it in a closet, and to celebrate, I'm drinking what's left of it.
To celebrate, coming on here, you're so kind.
That's really just to celebrate finding it, you know, kind of treasure trove. But it's its own celebration. And then I have the Redbreast I picked up from you. There's 2 of them today. So I have the shady drug deal one from the van, the lockdown pickup. Belfast, the friend at hand one.
That was really good. That was good. That was a good down at the railway station. Shh.
I know.
No one saw the drugs getting out of the van into the other van. It's perfectly fine. People, listen, we've got a fair crowd tonight. Listen, evening, Liam and Robert. Liam, Kit, how are we? Sean and Nicholas. Let's remind people of who you are, because there's maybe some people coming into this chat who don't know you. But Fionnán, you know, you're a lovable guy, but why love whiskey? And what got you into this chat? What got you into the whiskey room?
I was in Belfast. This guy pulled up with a dark van. He had a Redbreast friend at hand at the back, and he said, "You, come here, take that." I fell in love with it, and I went home and I researched as much as I could in a month's time. And now, you know, quiz me. I'm pretty sure I can stand my ground with the man. You know, I've even got the bottle to prove it. So yeah, relatively quickly. If I don't know something, I'll make it up. But I think there was nothing else manage to bluff.
You're just right. Mick McGuire's saying, did we wash our hair together at the same time? No, but fun enough, I just came out the shirt and I am very, very like, look at that. I mean, that's just that's class A. So I don't know what I couldn't, you know, wasn't enough time
do you use product?
No, look at this. That's just a wee bit of conditioner. You know what I mean? We're flying here, a wee bit of shampoo, a wee bit of conditioner. Fionnán, apparently you look like a Mancunian.
Yeah, in case it was up for discussion, I don't use product either.
Listen, Fionnán, last year we got you involved. We roped you into Belfast Whisky Week last year, and I promised you some pre-1980s Irish whiskey, and we ended up doing 2 sessions, didn't we? We did 2 sessions last year.
Yeah.
I want to talk about a couple of those liquids because a lot of people missed out on some really fabulous liquid. For me, and I'll be honest, for opening lots of bottles, I mean, the amount of bottles we open is huge amount of bottles, and the Whiskey Week allows me to open lots and lots of bottles. But the one that's got me out of all the bottles I've ever opened in my life has got to be that Napoleon.
Yeah, I mean, that was incredible.
I have got to, like, I'm just shocked, first of all, by it. I'm just shocked by the Napogue that we opened, and I'm just, I'm thankful we did it. A lot of people have said to me, "Can't believe you opened that," and I'm like, "Yeah, I can't initially," but then I'm thinking we needed to open the Napogue Castle. We needed to open that. We needed to open the likes of the powers, the 30-year-old powers,
yeah.
From earlier. That old white label. We had some really good Dundungari. We opened one of them, didn't we? White's 22, the club.
I mean, the mystery bottles were their own kind of fun.
Yeah.
Working out if something was from Con's water or if it was just Scotch in a Belfast bottle, or but yeah, the Napogue was. I mean, and it's funny because some of those. If you fish around, you'll find Old Bow Street pot still readily enough. It costs you a bit, but some of the rural pot still distilleries, the likes of B Daly, there are so few opportunities to taste them, and when you get them, it's like, okay, Napogue 1951, very very specific, the Cadenhead bottling chances, and then you have to kind of work out what the distillery character is through these kind of broken lights. And for me, B Daly, I remember Napogue 1951, and there's another one, funnily enough, from like 1949, just around then, but it's not Napogue. It was an actual, B Daly's distillery bottling, and out in the brewery tap pub in Tullamore for ages. And your man used to generously let, if you got him talking, he would let you have a little bit of the bottle, and it was going down for ages and ages and ages. And by the time I got to it, it was down to the dregs. But I kept hearing about this for a long time, and I remember trying that, and of course by then it's heavily oxidized, and you're getting these little blips. But for me, B Daly has always been this strange, almost like resinous pot still, like a very specific resin and linseed oil. If Powers was leathery, tobacco-y, musky, back of the shetty, and Bow Street was kind of more what we expect of pot still, more kind of robust, old fruits, etc. oil. B Daly, it's almost almost so dry it approaches kind of linseed oil. And when we opened that one for the first time I've ever had a B Daly, it wasn't just that; it was that in an impressive kind of spiced delivery. Because you're getting it at again, a more organic delivery than the tiny little dregs out of the bottom of a bottle or something. And it was so capable. It was so cool. It was like someone had like taken the herbs de Provence little sachet you get, and dumped it all out into the B Daly.
Because the big difference between the Napogue Castle that we tried and the 51 is that the 51 comes in at a relatively low ABV, comes in at 40%. Is it 43%? And this one wasn't. This one was 1950. It had a lot more alcohol to it. It was a hell of a lot more alcohol. I was actually trying to just find if I had I think it came in at least 46%. It could have been higher.
Again, it was B Daly allowed to shine is what it really came down to.
Yeah. And
B Daly given a chance,
Yeah, and listen, very, very impressed with it. And I'm glad that you had the chance to rattle through those whiskies, because I tell you what, everyone that got involved in those tastings, the positive comments were unreal. They were like, first of all, the whiskey, some of the whiskies, people hadn't heard of some of those whiskies. I mean, because look, the likes of the Club from McCubbin's, not many people would have heard of that. And then to try and figure out where it's coming from, maybe what distillery it's actually coming from. But yeah, I mean, I think we had a crock, didn't we? We had a crock from, was there Locks, was there?
Yeah.
I mean, look, it's just so, the whiskies and the commentary from that was really good, but actually what was really positive was all about you. So everyone was just like, Fionnán's amazing, Fionnán's amazing.
Russian accounts, deployed to push a narrative. Yeah.
Listen, but you've clearly tugged on the right, people's kind of thought process, because people have really, in tuned with what you have to say, and that's evident right now. I mean, I was very lucky to be interviewed for the BBC as part of one of your programs. Tell me a little bit about that, because I think people will be very eager to see this on the TV. People are going to want to know what you've been talking about.
Yeah, well, that to be clear, that's not my program. I'm just part of it. You know,
yes, that's fair. It's not your program, but
yeah,
you're narrating some of it. Yes.
I was hired as historical consultant by the BBC and I are doing a program on whiskey, and it's of course, since it's BBC and I, it's very, very kind of Ulster centric, but it also touches on Scotch whiskey and it touches on American whiskey, and of course whiskey, you know, in the rest of Ireland as well. And it's the director is a guy named Sean Maguire, and he wanted to do a kind of a social history of distilling. So look at it as an agricultural product, and look at tax evasion and this, you know, talk about the drink's history in ways that kind of touch history. And then Mark Thompson, who's the co-presenter, who's very interested in kind of, well, he's the former head of the Ulster Scots Cultural Fund, and his particular love is the kind of back and forth between, you know, the kind of thin water between Belfast and Glasgow, really. And he has a whole collection of old jugs that had, you know, of course, you know, Dunville's own Bladnoch distillery in Scotland and so forth, and you know the intercourse there. So again, very northern centric, but with weird kind of jettisons out to other forms of whiskey. And I was brought in. If Mark is the real presenter, I was brought in to advise on history and booze, basically, and people to select to interview. So I was allowed to pick the pretty faces, which included yourself.
I don't know if I'm pretty, and here the chances are they might not even feature me, which is perfectly fine. It's okay. You know, there's a hard truth about what I say. That Mark Thompson, fair play. The guy has such an eye, doesn't he? He's an eye for fantastically beautiful things. Really, he loves his history. I follow a lot of the stuff he does. I'm very in tune with the kind of stuff he talks about. But he's also behind, you know, if we don't mind name dropping him, he's behind some of that beautiful artwork, which is all about the Dunvilles, isn't he? So he's behind that with the actual Dunville distillery.
He designed the Ecklenville labels, the Dunvilles labels. So that's what his during the day he's a graphic designer. So he already had a connection to. In fact, I think I met him at Ecklenville. So again, he was already interested in the branding side, in the history of branding. So there's a whole bit that again is tied up with the history of Belfast in particular, the history of its intercourse with Scotch whiskey brands, the history of branding on bottles, stuff like that. So there's a lot of ground. And Mark was a fantastic sport about the whole thing, you know, because again, a lot of this was him deep sunk into, you know, very odd topics, getting thrown at John Teeling and being told, you know, right now you're going to learn about column stills. And he has to keep the eyes open. Go, wow, this is, well, you know, to be fair, he's so readily enthused, you know, that it was easy to manage, you know, but whenever we need you know, somebody to ask questions or so forth, you know, to a distilling person, someone from outside the world, Mark was great at that. He was extremely engaging.
Good. Listen, I just cracked on with a Redbreast 12-year-old cask strength, just because you'd said Redbreast, and I thought I was just sipping on some. I want to say hi to, there's a couple of people out here that have just popped in. So Sean, Jarlath Watson's comment on yourself and your attire. Martin McShane, yes. And look, Liam, I'm not too sure. Fionnán, do you have your own blog? No, because he's too cool for that. He is cool. He's cool. He doesn't need his own blog. He's too cool for that.
I wouldn't have, to be honest.
Shamini, how are we? Yes, good to see you. And yes, vanilla. It's a lovely label. The Dunvilles label is absolutely stunning. Connor, I'm glad you're on the 14-year-old Clanesh. Clynelish. Yeah, I'm going to get
more up those who really want to be posturing.
I know. So listen, your program's going to be coming out hopefully in a couple of months. I would assume, probably soon.
They had hoped for an extension because of COVID, and they were told no. So I was actually brought up to Belfast because since it's state media, you're allowed to travel, and I was literally the most heartbreaking experience. 2 days ago, I was put on a train to go up to Belfast, to go into the Duke of York and pretend to be drinking in a pub. And, you know, sit there they open the Duke of York, I'm sitting there at a table, pretending like here we are in a pub, enjoying ourselves. And, you know, Paul O'Hare is there behind the scenes, having just opened this like barred door and, you know, of course, the whole thing is this kind of miserable simulacra of what it was once like to be in pubs. And a lot of the like conversation scenes, as you know yourself, you were filmed in the Duke of York because there's all that media around.
And it was weird. It was really strange not having lots of people about in the Duke of York and in that space. I mean, like, you know, we have our tastings. The club has its tastings in the Duke of York. Belfast Whisky Week is centralised in that space, and yet, yeah, I mean, for this whole entire year, zero, nada, nobody. And it's been really, really strange. So going into that, funnily enough, going in the back door, because we weren't allowed in the front door. You know what I mean? They weren't open. Went in the back door, and 6 different punches on the door. That was the code, was it? You know what I mean? And then we were in. Well, I mean, for a wee cheeky wee lock-in. But we weren't. We're in filming, and it was important that we did that there. Listen, catch up anytime, David. It's good to see that you come on for the crack. I want to talk about. I've got 2 bottles here, Fionnán, that I'm maybe thinking about Whiskey Week. You know, going in the summer here. So my idea is to do at least 2 tastings with yourself. Potentially we might have a third, and we'll talk about that third in a second. But at least 2 tastings which are pre-1980s Irish whiskies, and I'm going to try and source as many as I can, and try and keep them as different as I can from the previous tastings. And that's going to be tough. It's going to be very, very tough for me to go and find all those types of whiskies. You know, they're not cheap. They don't come cheap. They're not something you can just pick up. You know, in your local grocery shop. This is something that we haven't, that we have to go and find. So I picked up 2 recently, and I thought this was a wee interesting one. And I'm conscious that it will pain me a hell of a lot if I do open this. So this is I'm not sure what, but maybe. So this one here would be an old Bushmills 1977. Wow. And that's a potential.
Yeah, absolutely. Potential. And I mean, those Maidenheads are fantastic. That authentic collection.
Look at this big ABV. 60.6.
No, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
You know, 1977, bottled in 1992. That's a potential. So I'm thinking we might want to explore that one. That could be interesting. And I'm thinking, sure, why not? But at the same time, I'm like, you know, my massive Bushmills collection. I'm conscious that this.
Out of curiosity, does that one say malt whiskey or is it Bushmills blended?
No. It doesn't say that at all. It doesn't say anything.
Because if it's a blend, 1977, the Coleraine column stills was still
interesting. Yeah, because it doesn't say that at all. It just says distilled 1977 and bottled, matured in an oak cask for 14 years. It specifically does not say.
Yeah, and for Cadenheads not to say is a giveaway itself. So yeah, because 1978 is when they closed down. You know,
and you know what? I could probably find out, because what I could do between now and then is speak to Cadenhead.
Oh, right.
And ask them, you know, what was the crack there? Is it a blend? Or is it a single malt? Interesting. So yeah, for it to be aged at 14 years, I've never come across a Bushmills from that time period, 14 years old.
Yeah.
And there's a fact. So, and then the second one I picked up recently, and I'm thinking we still need to get a lot of clarity on this one, right? But maybe we don't know what it is, or, you know, potentially. But I think I might have passed this one on to you. So it's called the Minstrel. It's a blended whiskey, 25 years old, over 25 years old.
Bonder, so I assume a Sheffield Bonder.
Sheffield Bonder. Now, I picked up, my wee granny is from Sheffield. And I picked it up thinking, well, I have the connection here. But it does say here, produce of Northern Ireland
and the Irish Free State. Yeah.
So it's a blend of whiskies between the two. Yeah?
Yeah, well,
someone has mentioned somewhere that this may include Rowan Co. Potentially. But I don't know, because it's written down on it.
I mean, DDC closed in the 20s. They kept DWD alive for much longer. So DWD really finally bit the dust around the war years. But obviously, the Free State implies, you know, again, like pre-war, or at least, you know, pre-1949. So at the very least, a 40s bottling.
Could be very, very interesting.
Yeah. And it's at 25 years, which means, again, take the 40s and work backwards, you know. So laid down in the 20s, if not the 10s.
So we'll see. Look, we'll see. I'll make a decision on those two. I'll make it, but there's lots. I'm going to try to find as many as I can. I think I've now sourced another Napole Castle, 1951, but not the ones that we normally see. So again, something different, you know. And I'm thinking it's nice to get that kind of out there and let people taste it. And I definitely know I have another couple of, you know, Bushmills, early 70s, 60s, potentially 50s also. So we'll look at that and maybe look at the you know, what we can find. But yes, try to source some of those old redbreasts. Try to source some of the kind of older Middleton stuff. You know, that'd be really nice also. But it's just so difficult. It's so hard, and like, you know, keeping my eyes peeled at all stages, trying to find the old stuff. You know.
Yeah, and it's getting harder by the looks of it. You know, again, some of them that I know I've moaned about Powers Pot Still often enough in public that, you know, it used to turn up all the time at tastings and things. And it's just gotten rarer and rarer and rarer, you know, with the increased attention around pot still as a category and the increased value of a lot of the old ones. You know, Willie Murphy used to pick up those Powers from the 90s, and you know, there was no interest, you know, in old Irish whiskey, money wise. So
no. A couple of quick ones here. Robert says those pre-1980s, surely you get them at Lidl. Yes, you do. Yes. I can, and Richard, that's really kind. Look, the work that Fionnán does in order to bring the history of whiskey to the forefront is amazing. And not me. I'm concerned about, I want to taste the stuff. You know, I don't think it should resonate in bottles for very much longer. I don't think that's fair. There's a lot of people who want to taste whiskey, and we should be tasting it from bygone era. So yeah. Martin says that you look at Fionnán's face when you lifted the Cadenhead. Awesome. He just, you know, you that beautiful kind of, oh, it's a baby. It's we could do something with that.
The rose glow of, you know, how many glasses this is. Yeah.
Here, you can't go wrong with Redbreast, can you?
Oh my God. I mean, some of those, it doesn't get said often enough. Those single casks, you know, were, I mean, I think more so than even the super premium, you know, dream casts, etc. That initiative to have those single casts for pubs and for, you know, people at friend at hand was such a step forward, just in terms of the diversity, in terms of the quality, in terms of the outreach. I remember, because when we picked this up, it was for a very specific reason. For that BBCN, I think I was being put on a boat to Islay to interview Jim McEwen about Irish whiskey, Scotch whiskey, and Irish whiskey, and I was thinking, oh fuck, what do I bring that can, you know, stand up on behalf of the category? I was pacing up and down the room thinking, and of course the first things that came into my head were those publican single casks, something I knew he wouldn't have had, that I really felt this is world class and it can go toe to toe with the best of Scotch. And yeah, I remember again, we had to pick it up from you in a van because everywhere was closed, and we got on the boat, and then seeing his eyes light up, you know, trying it, and he'd never actually had a redbreast of any kind. So I've been waiting to try this for a very long time, and I told him, well, it's not a normal redbreast, it's for the shop in Belfast, blah blah blah. But I mean, it is astounding, the whole range of them, you know. I feel the same way about the Palace Bar one.
Yeah, I mean, the friend at hand one, I mean, going head to head amongst its peers, you know, amongst all those similar age ones, 25, 26-year-old ones, it stands above. And the Dreamcast, it stands above. It's very it's very unique. I mean, that kind of cola look about it, kind of flat cola, you know, it is stunning. I'm just glad. I mean, Jim McEwen, oh, you got to meet a legend, and I hope you liked it.
Yeah. Again, it was, you know, thank God. That he was just being really polite, and he's a good actor. But no, it was again, it was put in that situation that, you know, the kind of flight or fight response kicks, and you think, for all the love I have about various Irish whiskies, think, oh geez, if I'm standing before McEwen on behalf of Ireland to Scotland in this kind of sudden, you know, ambassadorial role, what do you reach for?
And what did it give you back in return?
Oh, Octomore, but from like a cask, just a barrel. He said he'd enjoyed. So it was just a cask full of Octomore.
Oh, brilliant!
So
Brilliant.
yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
that's,
Octomore.
that's that's difficult to top. Like, oh, I particularly like this cask. Here's a sample. But he was extremely liberal with the sample as well, which helped.
Spot on, because I tell you what, it's Octomore is one of my favourite. Bruichladdich, first of all, as a distillery, really has ticked a lot of my boxes. Big fan of the Octomore. I love the mass amount of peat. Those. I mean, the entire range. I don't think there's an Octomore that can disappoint. If you're looking for a peated whiskey, that's all it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. It could
probably the peated whiskiest that I've ever had are Octomores. And expensive, unfortunately. That in a bar, very expensive here in Belfast. I remember one of our whiskey clubs back in the day. One of our guests, or one of our members, I say one of our guests, but one of our members had he'd said, "Listen, what drink should I get afterwards?" And we were talking about different whiskey. I said, "Go for the Octomore, go for it." And he's like, "Yeah, 2 Octomores," and then he got the bill and he nearly shot himself. But yeah, it was like it was a tenner a shot. I think it was at least a tenner a shot.
I think I have an Octomore. All this talk of where are we? There we go. There's an Octomore.
There we go.
Yeah, he actually gave me a bottle to go home. So yeah, this is McEwen's cask. Although this is not the same one. This is from.
No, that looks an ID.
He has formed his own independent bottling hustle, which is what this is, the Cask Whisperer, and so they're all McEwen's privately owned casks that he bought off the distillery.
Lovely.
But we were having a different, just a straight cask full, and then this he gave me a bottle of, and as you can see, most of that was drunk on the boat home.
Oh,
it's a terrible. Have you ever been on that rib, the Ballycastle? It's it's a grim experience. Some of the choppiest water in Europe.
But people take jet skis across that little bit.
Oh, it's what is it? The second largest sustained whirlpool in the world is Corrie Vrecken.
There's a good whiskey. There's a good Ardbeg.
Bit of trivia. Did you know George Orwell almost drowned in Corrie Vrecken?
No way.
He lived on Jura.
The cliffs, isn't there? He does something about the cliffs, does he? He writes something about
Well, he was writing 1984 while cottaging on Jura, and then went fishing and almost ended up drowning. You're taking your life into your own hands. Unfortunately, poor Sean had the bucket with him and was I think he got seasick and was vomiting. And you had Mark Thompson on the boat being filmed going like, "Here we are approaching Scotland," and then just off camera was poor Sean with the bucket.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I should have been on the outtake. Someone should have had the phone going and taken a video of that. Yeah, they should have. Listen, there's a couple of people I just want to say hi to just because they're in here. So Line S121, excellent, thanks very much. And John Dunn, yes, the 10.1. Are you talking about the 10.1 Octomore? 100%. I all of the Octomores, I mean, they're so good. But I mean, for Bruichladdich, for me, it's the Black Arts. Love the Black Arts. I think they're absolutely great. I mean, absolutely brilliant. But yes, Octomore and indeed. Thank you very much. The trick with the Ballycastle boat is to drink a few in the distillery that morning so you fall asleep for the journey. Yeah, that's on the way back. I mean, you've got to get there first, doesn't it?
Well, it's only down the road from Bushmill, so if you want, you can stock up before you go.
It is, and and there's probably going to be another wee distillery close there, Glenarm's, potentially going to have a distillery out there. Yeah, and I think, look, everyone would have travelled between the islands there, I remember, look, my family, so my grandmother, she's born Cushendall area. That's where they're from. My father would have spent his entire holidays in Torhead, out just outside of Ballycastle. That's that would be my family home in that respect on my father's side, So they're really big on in that kind of area, and I think that my grandmother, she moved, to Scotland because it was a hop, skip, and a jump. People were travelling between the two countries continuously, You know, we've I think we've saw a slight decline in that recently, but I would have said, you know, that it's been a constant over all the years, over all the centuries, that you've had people coming and going between the two countries. So, you know, I think I'd like to see more of those little boats. I'd like to see a wee rib bouncing about
Yeah.
all over the place. Campbelltown, Ballycastle, Campbelltown. That's what we need.
Oh, there already is Ballycastle to Campbelltown.
You could go. Well, you can go Ballycastle, Isla, then Campbelltown. Is that right?
No, you can go straight on when
Shut up.
they're at peak season. You can do the whole triangle.
Then that's what we should, because that's what it's all about. It's about getting to those little islands, not meaning having such a good time. I have a caravan up in Ballycastle, looks right out onto Rathlin Island, and beyond that I can see the Paps of Jura, which is beautiful. Yeah. You know, I can see parts of Isla. You know, it's a stunning place.
No, it's amazing, and yeah, they're you can see one from the other. They're so close, you know.
Mm-hmm. Of course, no, they really are.
So, and part of the trip was of course the early history of the reason we were going there for the narrative was, well, you're a Kane, you know. Anya Nikon married Anuis MacDonald, and the marriage train included the McBaha, the Beaton medical kindred, and a lot of the early distilling texts in Scotland are written by Beatons. They're Scots Gaelic or really kind of shared, what was called classical Gaelic, so shared literary standard between the two. Translations of Avicenna essentially, and translations of Alderati and these kind of early alchemical texts. But you can see literally by tracking manuscripts and go back and forth which one was copied from which. So there was that proximity, that closeness.
Okay, look, I'm lucky to share my name with such a profound Irish family. That O'Cahans would be so massive in history, wouldn't they? That what were they? They were the King O'Neill, was it? And then you had like your two families, so
the O'Donnell and the O'Cahans would have been second only to O'Neill for power in the area.
And actually, I joke with there's a couple of people I joke about with, and I would call myself a galloglass. And for people who maybe don't know what a galloglass is, I would pronounce myself as being a galloglass. So I pretend to be an Irishman who would come to Scotland and fight for mercenaries and fight for big landowners over in Scotland. And so my natural enemy, I was trying to explain this. My natural enemy is a Campbell. So that my natural enemy is the Campbell clan, and yeah, there's some weird history there about myself and the Campbells, which I
if you look, that whole region, unfortunately, half of Scotland's natural enemy was the Campbell family.
Yeah,
yeah, they won't.
Very much so. Yeah, I just moved on to Scotch actually, just because we're chatting away. Sorry, I moved on to that's a 16-year-old Longmorn. So there you go, 16-year-old Longmorn. Really had this on Friday night with a club here. Second fill bourbon barrel, and then its final casking is in a first fill XPX, but 59%. This, my friend, had some scores with our club on Friday night. It has done so well, and it's just what everyone wants from a Scottish whiskey. Like, everyone was just super impressed. It's very hard to impress people within the club. They're very, very hard markers.
Yeah, I've seen you at it. You're a picky bunch.
Yeah, and this is a big space side. A beast of a whiskey. I'm a super fan of Longmorn, but see these independent bottlings. Boom. Absolutely, guys, everyone needs to try that. This to me is beating the 12-year-old Redbreast cask strength, which is very, very difficult in a tasting. Very, very difficult.
The Longmorn is incredible. I can't remember the last time I had a Longmorn.
Oh, so good, so good.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was Longmorn Takatsuru trained at the kind of godfather of Japanese whiskey.
No way.
But he was again, it was Longmorn's principles that were brought back to Japan as originally as Yamazaki and then as Yoichi.
There you go. Someone said he was just thinking that. Okay, so listen, I want to quickly talk. We've only got about 10 minutes left, but I just want to chat a little bit about the vintage casks. So you've got 5 minutes here now just to chatter on about vintage casks. What was this all about? Where did it start? And what is the process of these vintage casks?
Yeah, well, the vintage cask is Boan's name for them. For me, it's just a matrix of, PhD work. But yeah, so I'm writing a PhD on the history of Irish mash bills, and Boan very, very generously agreed to come on board to recreate these mash bills in a controlled setting. So that was always supposed to be part of the thesis, but I'd never worked out exactly how it was going to happen, and probably wouldn't have. But they stepped in, and Matty made it happen essentially, and the Coonies have been wonderful. Have never said no to anything I wanted, despite the fact a lot of this stuff is a pain in the arse. We distilled, so everything else is kept constant: fermentation times, flow rates, everything, yeast, cut points, and then mash bills are oscillated based on historical precedents, going up and down. In a kind of a controlled selection. The ones chosen were picked for a very clear reason, and they'll be sent off to Heriot Watt for a GCMS examination, and they'll be subjected to a blind panel of flavor creators in the Irish distilling industry. So I think we've maxed out 30 people, all head blenders and distillers from a wide range of companies, going from very, very small to the biggest in Irish whiskey. So it's been great. I mean, the response from the industry has been fantastic. The idea that it is a trade neutral, that it's an academic project, that the results are made available to all of them. And then Boan have sold off the CAS to punters and publicans and societies and whatnot, and anyone who's come looking. And that was where the term vintage mash bills came from. So that's really the name of the program. And those are all gone now. They sold very, very quickly, which was a great endorsement from the whiskey community, really. And it's good, instead of it becoming a brand of some kind or another, it was put out into the system. It's great goodwill for Boan, but it gets it into the bloodstream.
I think I'm look. I mean, I obviously now have a horse in the race, or 10 potentially. So, I'm not sure how many of these will end up, becoming, becoming available. But I've tried hard for Belfast Whisky Club. I've tried hard to get as many casks as possible. I think it's, I just think it's a phenomenal opportunity. I see it as a drinker, as someone who is enthused by whiskey, who wants to see everything. I'm just blown away by the fact we might be tasting distillate-driven idea from 100 years ago. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And it's not going to happen. This is not going to be a reoccurrence. This isn't going to happen, monthly, yearly, even the next 10 years. This isn't going to just keep on happening. This has been a one-off project, PhD specific. This is you looking at lots of different things. And you've been very lucky. I mean, you've been a very lucky boy. You're like one of those little kids who says to dad, "Listen, Daddy, I need those sweets in the sweet shop." And your dad went, "Yeah, mate, go into the sweet shop and just have what you want. Just pick." That's what you've been able to do. No one said no. No one said, "No, you cannot do this," or "No, we are not." Boan have opened their doors like this. And yes, I mean, they will benefit from this, because there's no doubt that the chances are all of these casks that are released, and I think there has to be way less than 120 casks full stop, because the amount of mash bills that you've actually made. So not a lot. They're keeping it real. They're going sherry, rum, and kind of reconditioned casks. So there's no bourbon casks in there, because we wouldn't have been using bourbon casks really. We would have been using rum. Wine casks. That's what would have been used at the time. So I think that Boan are going to get a big, whether or not it's fiscal payoff, they're going to get a payoff. They're going to get a payoff because people are going to talk about this. We're going to know where the spirits come from. I'm super excited for it, and I really am. We managed community buy-ins, community led. So we want lots of people in the community to get on board with that, and we'll still have some opportunities maybe in the future, for people to still get involved. But I think for me, if I was greedy, I'd want to alter myself, because I just think it's going to be a phenomenal part of history. So we're talking historically, but actually right now, what people are doing across all the different distilleries, particularly new ones, this is something special. This is something to grab a hold of and go, do you know what? Let's take this opportunity. Let's actually buy into this, as a whiskey drinker, an Irish whiskey drinker, and get involved. And I think there's going to be a lot of people, Fionnán, because you've opened up this can of worms, a lot of people at the end of this, if they didn't get to taste it and they didn't get to try it, might kick themselves, might be annoyed in some respects, because actually I think that you have done something which a lot of people won't have the time for, don't have the knowledge, and certainly don't have the capability to create and go backwards and create these vintage casks. Call it vintage, call it whatever you like, but I think as a program, I think it's vintage cask to me suits, because actually this is something that we are looking at. It's okay for Bushmills, don't get me wrong, it's okay for IDL to pull out a 30-year-old, 40-year-old whiskey. Yeah, that's vintage, but only 30, 40 years ago, boys. You know what I mean? Let's get a mash bill from 100 years ago. Let's talk about a mash bill from Belfast from 100 years ago, if there is one. Potentially, I don't know, but if there is one, that's what I want to taste. Do you know what I mean? That's what that's what I'm all about. But yeah, hat off to you, son, for it. And here, that third tasting I'm talking about, what would be nice at Belfast Whisky Week is to try those distillates. And if that's something we can work out, we're going to try hard. I mean, I can't promise anything, but if we can try hard to try and get those distillates to people and do a special tasting during Belfast Whisky Week of the distillate, that'll be something that I will push for. And if we can, I think it'd be great crack.
Yeah, massive crack. So they have to stay under wraps for the moment, because again, there's when we have this session again, the real hope is that all this information, and I've been quite clear to people, any distillery, without favoritism or cost that participates will receive, everything, the findings from Harriet Watt, etc., the mash bill breakdown. But because of scientific rigor, we have to keep everything hush until these master blenders and distillers have sat down. You can't walk into the room knowing what they are or second guessing themselves or whatever. So that night we can tell people what it is. So it's booked now tentatively for kind of late semester. We have to wait until we can hold it responsibly. So we're sitting on our thumbs for the moment. But we're not as grim as it is. We're not living in end times. So when this panel eventually gets to sit down, and I think it's people are starved of stuff to do. I think people were delighted just to have the opportunity to, and the response from the distilling community was so wonderful, and everyone from, the fact that you could have, Irish distillers sitting across the table from someone the size of, Dave and Radamon sitting aside from, whatever, it's been amazing how quick and how enthusiastic the replies were. Very humbling, really.
I'm sure it is humbling. It must be a humbling thing. Serge, hi, how are we? And yeah, look, I mean, interesting. Will the GI affect them being released? No, not at all. Whether or not the GI technical file is rewritten, I don't think it'll make much of a difference. These are just what they are. They'll have to be, if they're not technically part of the GI, technical file, they're going to have to come out and call it, whiskey of some description.
No, of course. And I mean, and I know it touches on it very clearly. And I've always made a personal policy of saying the same thing to everybody and being very candid about, legislation from a historical perspective. But similarly, the thesis is not about the GI. The thesis is about history, and history is history, full stop. And so that's what I've tried to, tell people. The GI or anyone's thoughts on the GI cannot touch the PhD. It can't. Sure. I can't go in with an agenda, whatever. This is a very different set of gloves, and I think treating it as itself and what people want to do with that history is the industry's own decision. Ultimately, all I can do is just tell them, to the best of my findings, what occurred. Exactly. How they handle it is their own call.
Listen, Fionnán, I want to say Sláinte. I want to say thank you very much for joining me tonight. Thank you. It's been a bit of crack. I hope you've enjoyed it. And listen, I look forward to seeing you during Belfast Whisky Week. Good luck with the PhD. Good luck with those tastings, and I hope things work out. And listen, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us tonight. Thank you. Sláinte.
Sláinte.